What you have in the UBEC Act stipulate that 2% of the UBEC fund should be dedicated towards special needs. However, that 2% is grossly inadequate to fund special education. So one of the interventions that happened in the past 3 to 4 years was actually to see how UBEC can increase that 2% to 4%, number one. Number two is to see how the 4% or even the 2% in the past, how it has been utilized and what components of it is actually being utilized or maybe is even underutilized. Number three, in terms of the smart action plan that the state government released to UBEC for them to get the counterpart funding between UBEC and the state government, how to what extent is special needs education indicated in the counterpart funding in which federal government UBEC actually gives to state government, and the state government actually even implement special needs education? The fourth intervention that I know that has happened in the recent past, there is this age limit to what UBEC can actually, the funds from UBEC. Oftentimes you observe that it is actually meant for basic education. And if you look at our curriculum, what basic education, I think it does not exceed GSS 2 to 3. And there's an age limit to it. There's an age limit to that. If you check that, there's an age limit to it. But there's a word called waithood. WAITHOOOD. Wait and hood. HOOD. Waithood. So waithood is actually a global development word which speaks about the fact that oftentimes persons, not just persons with disability now, they don't get education at early stage as a result of maybe their environment and the like. So one of the things we actually, that I know that went into that because they wanted to actually they want to revise the UBEC Act, is to see how UBEC funds can actually support people that started education late and not just putting that age limit to it, that age barrier. So I think those are just a few things. And I think in the past 2 or 3 years, UBEC increased the special needs 2% to something that was 0.8%, not up to 4%. I might not be able to give the specific figures, but I think last year or upper year, there was an increase in the percentage allocated to special needs in the UBEC funds. I'm not for working with UBEC, but I think that's part of the intervention from the development sector that I know, and it has been monitored, and there is something at least to track that in their budgetary, in their budgets. The Smart Action Plan, for example, that's of Lagos, the LSUBEB, that's Lagos State, within the monitoring plan that was given between 2015, 2016, 2017, in terms of the physical infrastructure, I think the compliance rate of inclusion of special needs education was rated around 43% in terms of the monitoring and tracking, in which one of the things which was put in after that monitoring and evaluation is that the 2017-2018 Smart Action Plan, in which the governor of Lagos State approved around, was not June, July, 1.4 billion. One of the things which LSUBEB agreed to and committed to is that they would ensure 4% of that fund goes to special education. But the one that was monitored in the past, I think it was just 42% compliance. In terms of, I'm using from the 2% that was even stipulated for them to do. However, I think Lagos State government has gone beyond the 2% in terms of the inclusive education. They've already mainstreamed one school in every local government to be an inclusive school. In the Northeast specifically, Adamawa, I think you see that Adamawa or Gombe, I could say it also as well that one of the things we observed this year is that they actually mainstream 3 schools to be an inclusive schools. They provide not just in terms of physical infrastructure now, they provided physical infrastructure and they also employ special needs education. In Kano and Enugu, the monitoring and evaluation that I know is currently ongoing. The outcome of that inclusion is not yet visible. I don't know the result as I speak to you, but I know there is a monitoring and evaluation team who is actually trying to see the outcome of that as we speak. However, making schools inclusive does not have to talk about the physical infrastructure alone, because one of the things what Lagos State did in the past is what we are saying no. That is the special school approach, making a session of a school to be special. And now we're saying no, make just one school inclusive. So there is a model currently ongoing now, developed by the Joint National Association of Persons with Disability. It's called the MAISE model, the model for accessible and inclusive school environments. MAISE. It's called the MAISE model. So the MAISE model speaks about in terms of how can you actually make schools inclusive. It talks about the physical infrastructure. It talks about the pedagogic, which has to do with the teaching aids. It talks about employing persons with persons who has special needs education into it, and it also talks about how to work with the SBMC, that's the School-Based Management Committee, to make to understand issues of inclusion, so that schools can be included. Something that is quite good for now. It has been included in the FCT Inclusive Education. Recently, the MAISE model was also introduced to them, specifically to Lagos State UBEC, so that they can actually consider that MAISE model in all the schools. They will be mainstream to become an inclusive school in next year, when they are implementing the funds that is given to them by the UBEC right now. So I think those are part of the things I know for now. I think one of the organizations you can definitely access in Lagos is Human Development Initiative. I think they've worked rigorously to advocate for inclusion, and they've done a lot of monitoring and evaluation recently. Human Development Initiative, I think they're around Yaba. They have a couple of data and they have reports data. Sometimes when you go to organizations and these things, you find yourself, they have a technology that is not working. Sometimes it's just about sitting down with whoever is developing it to say, look, or going online to see something that work close to that and working with them. I've seen a couple of instances whereby persons with disability are employed as customer care agent, for example, and because they are employed, the kind of softwares they are using there doesn't actually support accessibility or screen readers. And what they needed to do is to sit down with somebody who developed it, and I also intervene in that process. And today it's working. It's about putting the person, this is what we want. See, when we click on this, it doesn't work. So it's also the interest of the organization willing. And I can give you a typical example of that is Ikeja Electric Distribution Company, which is owned by Sahara Group. They have at least 2 persons with disability who are blind persons who are in their customer care. And today, the platform they are using for their customer care is working very well. They can record, make data, and before it wasn't working well, it was completely not accessible. So it's the interest of the organization willing to change, willing to make it accessible, and their mindset towards that. So the more we keep having samples of that, the better we can use it to actually advocate and tell other people to modify their system. But in terms of learning, there are already existing numerous ones. With regards to the coding in the national education policy that we have, it is not even the general ones are not even yet implemented, except few states who are already thinking of implementing. And I think the last time that Lagos State government started Code Lagos, I remember the Code Lagos when they started the initiative. It took me time to explain to the special advisor to the governor on education about the issues. I really sat down with those teams to talk about inclusion critically. That was in 2015, 2016, to emphasize on that. And one way or the other, they tried to bring it in. However, we still don't have the technical know-how and the skills to actually do that. Many people who are general tutors who can code, who can give these technology skills, they don't understand accessibility, they don't understand inclusion, and they don't even understand how to teach. So it still requires a lot of investment. For only few persons have the knowledge of even doing this kind of things. And so there's still lots of investment in that area. And one thing people just don't know is that beyond the fact that they see this thing as a right, there is a lot of investment, there's a lot of gain for the company. I mean, economic gain and lots of money. I can tell you authoritatively that as the last time the research the World Bank carried out, that if education is fully invested and special education is fully invested, there is likelihood for you to have a 3% increase in the GDP of the country in terms of the kind of funds that kind of sector will bring back, that kind of investment will bring back into the country. So there's still lots of gaps there. Companies will come here, they will produce these things, and there will be more employment, and it will add to the GDP. And in terms of technology as well, if you train these persons to have the coding skills, to have the knowledge, for them to be empowered, then like it will increase employment. And even if government has to employ you, definitely they'll make tax from you. So it has
Yes.
a lot of return back, and that's what we call social return on investment. We are just around between 1 to 5 out of 100 on STEM courses and inclusion of persons with disability around STEM courses. We don't have financial inclusion. Our financial inclusion is poor. Our financial management knowledge, our financial literacy knowledge, which would empower you to even become a better entrepreneur, is quite poor. How many persons with disability take courses around accounting? How many of them take courses around computing science? They cannot go into you. Schools are not opening the options for them. Even primary schools and universities, the teachers doesn't allow them to take these courses. So it's still a long way. It's a long walk to freedom. So for STEM courses in Nigeria, for persons with disability, I can't even rate us 5% out of 100. For now, it's still a poor thing that we should not even dive into. Now, if we have the physical barriers, the infrastructure, the physical accessibility, if they are in school, the first set of things is about investing in the right set of special needs educators who can actually give this knowledge to the kids. Number two is about providing the facilities for them to even learn those things. So if they have the facilities, they have the educators who can teach them, then definitely they will learn. So for example, what Lagos State is trying to promote now is more special education, not tilted towards inclusive education. The inclusive education policy is not yet really, really implemented for me. Inclusive education means I can take my child to any school and it will be inclusive. So what they are doing more is special education. We need to really emphasize on that. That's number one. Number two, I think they've really tried to some extent in terms of employing special needs educators, but there is still more work to be done in that area. So the third part of it has to do with pedagogy, the kind of tools you provide in schools for children to learn in terms of inclusion and in terms of STEM, which is very, very important now. When you don't have, even for the schools that have been set aside for the last time I know there was monitoring around that, the STEM is still very, very low. Very, very low. So there's still more work to be done in that regard. And the last but not the least, yes, there is funding for UBEC, but there is need to increase. And the reason why I said so, if you set aside 2 or 4% as the money for special education, in a place whereby they say 15% of every state population seems to be persons with disability, and in a place like Lagos where you have close to 20 million. So if you have 15% of 20 million to be persons with disability, that's like 3 million. And in a place whereby you have what's it called, whereby you have 3 million persons with disability, what that means is that you cannot have less than 500,000 among them to be children. So I gave a statistics. Let me just recap. The statistics I gave is that according to World Bank and World Health Organization, it is said that 15% of the world, national, regional, or state level or state level population, 15% of that population are persons with disability. Now, I gave a statistics that Lagos State claims to have 20 million persons who reside in Lagos. And if you do that 15% of that population, that means you have 3 million persons with disability. As the last count, it was around 1 point something to 2 million. And a lot of persons with disability actually flow into Lagos, both kids and adults. So if you do around 3 million, what that means is that out of that 3 million, you cannot have less than 500,000 to be children with disability. That's like 1 of 6 of that population. That's around 15% of that population as well are likely to be children with disability, if not even more. So if you have 500,000 of children with disability, going by that disaggregation, the implication of that is that definitely you cannot use a 2% to 4% to fund that numbers. You cannot use 2 to 4% of your education budget or of the UBEC budget to actually fund that numbers of persons. Because I'm sure persons who are children with disability, children going to school in Lagos, I don't know the numbers, but I am very sure 2 to 4% can not be enough, considering that investment on special education at first is always expensive. Investment on special education at the beginning, at the basic level, it's sometimes quite humongous, but the returns are quite enormous than what we think we could get from it. So those are just the number. Those are just part of my own concern that there should be a tremendous increase in terms of funds towards inclusive education in Lagos State and every part of the country beyond the 2 to 4%. This year, I remember the governor of Lagos State signed 1.4 billion, which is a counterpart funding from Lagos State. I don't know what UBEC has released, but what I know is that the fund that the one given both from the state and UBEC jointly together, 1.4 billion is just a counterpart funding for this year, 2017-2018.